Hey everybody, welcome to Local Business Hacks Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Case, and I'm on a mission to help you. Every week, we're going to be talking to local business owners and experts to get their best tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. This show is designed to teach you, inspire you, and motivate you to take massive action and start to build your future-proof business. Whether you're just starting off or you're taking your existing business to the next level, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hey, local business hackers. I'm your host, Director of Global Business Development for Referrizer, joined today by the CEO of Buzz Franchise Brands, Kevin Wilson. Kevin, welcome to Local Business Hacks, buddy.
Carl, nice to be with you. I'm looking forward to it.
We appreciate you coming on. Would love to hear from you. What got you to this point in your career? Obviously, you weren't always a CEO. So talk to us about this ladder that you climbed to get to this point.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. It started off like a lot of people. I studied business in college. When I graduated, I had an opportunity to work at a consulting firm called Bain and Company. So most people, if they've heard of Bain outside of large businesses, it's because Mitt Romney ran for president, and he technically at the time was my first boss. So he was the CEO. I was way down here, but I certainly remember him, and he was a great leader for us. But I learned a lot during that period of time. It was really a continuation and acceleration of my business education. I left Bain after being with them for about 6 years and started a bagel store in Dallas, Texas. Yeah, I went from consulting to bagels. And we ended up growing with some partners. We grew that to about 30 locations around the state, both corporate and franchise. That's really where I cut my teeth on franchising. And I was young at the time. I was in my late 20s. And then after several years, we sold the business. I then got recruited to Johannesburg, South Africa, to be part of a management team that was turning around South African Airways. And that was, so just for your listeners to be clear, I didn't necessarily go from bagels to running parts of an airline. I did have some expertise in consulting of airlines when I was in the consulting practice at Bain and Company. So I was in Johannesburg for 3 years, ran the cargo operations, the maintenance operations, learned a lot. Loved Africa, but learned a lot about working with people, leading teams. And then when we moved back to the States, my wife and I landed in Virginia Beach, which is where we are right now, to raise our family. I guess other than I was in private equity for several years, I guess one of the things I'm very proud of professionally was the first private equity gig was down in Mexico City. And one of the things we did is we started an airline. I wrote a business plan for the creation of a new airline in Mexico. There were only 12 airlines at the time, so we thought for sure you need a 13th airline. So with a bunch of people, we started it. We started with 6 aircraft in 2006. Today, if you look at the airline industry in Mexico, it's now 3 airlines down from 13. Volaris is now, which is the company we founded, is now number 1. We have about 125 aircraft. It's very much like Frontier Airlines. The management team is outstanding. A lot of people don't realize this, but Mexico is the second largest bus market in the world. And so the idea of getting those people off the buses into the airplanes in a very cost-effective way has really changed a lot of lives in Mexico. So it's been great. And then about 12 years ago, I saw a local business called Mosquito Joe. Liked what I saw. It was basically outdoor pest control. They took care of mosquitoes in your backyard. It was great. I bought the business, hired a few people. We rebranded the business, turned it into a franchise opportunity. And then we grew that over 5 years to about 350 locations across 34 states. And that's called Mosquito Joe. So it went really well. Along the way, we learned a lot. And we said, if we can make outdoor pest control fun and sexy and people are successful at it, we can probably do that with other concepts. And so that's when we began to incubate Pool Scouts, our outdoor pool cleaning business, then Home Clean Heroes, indoor house cleaning. And then in 2019, we bought a business called British Swim School. So we teach swim lessons to young babies all the way up to full stroke development for adults, among a number of things. In that business, we're one of the largest in the country for that business. And then most recently, we started a specialty lighting business, largely focused on Christmas lights, holiday lights, And actually, I will unveil it today. This is the unveiling today. Yesterday, it was called Grand Illuminations. Drumbeat, please. Today, it's called Wonderly Lights. So literally, we went through a rebranding over the summer. We think that the new name, Wonderly Lights, and what we're going to do with it is going to speak a lot more to what the business is all about. So that actually just happened this morning. So, and that's where we are today. I've got roughly about 100 employees. We have 4 different businesses we run. We have a lot of fun at doing what we're doing. We love it. We're passionate about helping our franchisees do well in business, and hopefully over time it changes their lives when they're doing that. So yeah, there's a quick summary for you.
Well, not to say you've accomplished some things at your young age, but congratulations to the wanting to be the 13th and the trial and error in this space that continues to blossom for you. I have so many questions, but first things first, how can people get in contact with you or with these brands from the franchising perspective or as an end user?
Yeah, I mean, probably the easiest way is just to go to our holding company's website, buzzfranchisebrands.com. And if you go there, all of our brands are linked to the individual companies that we own. Alternatively, you can link in with me at Kevin Wilson, Buzz Franchise Brands. On my LinkedIn profile, you'll see it. So we'd be happy to talk to anyone.
Amazing. Thanks, Kevin. Before we jump into your hacks, I'd love to hear, you got your feet wet in franchising, 28 years ago, 30 years ago?
Yeah, probably 30 years ago.
And now when you look at concepts, obviously having 4 brands that have some extensive growth behind them, has it become easier to turn on from acquiring a company and turning them into franchising? Is that how you just look at businesses now, as from a franchising perspective? Talk to me about the mindset change from owning a business to transitioning into the franchise world.
Yeah, I know a lot about franchising. I like franchising a lot, and it's really the avenue that I and my team would follow with Buzz Franchise Brands. Not all businesses, I think, need to or should be franchised. I think it's a case by case example. I often talk to people about the businesses that they own, and there's so much involved with deciding whether something should go franchising. Do you have capital to grow? Is it important to get a dominant market position very quickly, or can you grow more slowly? So a lot of that really comes down to the individual that owns the business, their backgrounds, what they've been able to accomplish, and what's going on in the market at the time. So as much as it would be nice to put everything into a sort of a single box, I think it's a little bit more involved. But ultimately, you ask the same questions, you might just get different answers, which lead you down a different path.
Amazing. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
As far as I can imagine, your toolkit is full of tools at this point in your career. I'd love to hear from you. What are some stories that really molded and put these tools in your toolbox that are your local business hacks?
There are different things that we've done. I think if I was to, and again, it's more than one thing, but if I was to summarize it, in our world of Buzz, it all starts with our team and our people. And so when we think about that, we think about, one, creating a culture that is a place where people really enjoy coming to work. They feel empowered. They feel like this is a place they could stay for a long time. We look at our retention rates of our team members. And so that was, number one, that was really important to us. We listen to what's important to them, and we try to accomplish what they would like to see in a workplace. And so I think that's really important to us. Part of building that culture is making sure you get the right people on the team in the right seats. And so, where I think a lot of people, a lot of managers have a tendency to really fire slow and hire fast, I guess, is really what I've seen historically. And it's very common, right? You just, you don't want to have the difficult conversation with somebody. So, we sort of flipped it on its side, where we take the time to hire people. We put them through, to get an interview with us, you have to have the qualifications for the job that you're seeking. And have you done it before historically? So we can screen that out on a telephone interview. And then what we do, if the telephone interview goes well, then we bring people in effectively for anywhere from a half a day to a day of interviews. And they rifle through for 30 minutes at a time and see anywhere from 8 to 12 people in our company. including the senior team. And anytime we've deviated from that approach, we've usually got ourselves into trouble. And sometimes when we deviated, it's all been on me 100%. So I have to clean up my own mess that I created, which I'm fine to do. So I don't deviate from that very often anymore. But that to me is a really important part about getting a team that can function well. It doesn't mean they all have to be the same, but it does mean that they have to be able to function well within the team. Attitude is a real big, important thing for us at Buzz. And if they don't have the right attitude, and very quickly, I mean, we make mistakes. We continue to make mistakes on the hiring. We make fewer of them, and a lot of them are on the attitude. And if they don't have the attitude, then they're probably not going to be with us very long, even if they have the skills to do it.
Hire what you can't teach.
Hire what you can't teach. That's real important to us. I mean, I would say the other thing is we're a performance-based culture as well. So it's not just, hey, we're going to show up and, Friday afternoons, we're going to have some beer and it's going to be great. It's really important to us. We're very thoughtful about what it is we're trying to achieve as an organization. So we have what we call our strategy for winning for each of our businesses. And it's a template that we follow that is very consistent, and it speaks to what the important metrics are for each of the businesses and the initiatives they're covering. The strategy for winning are 4 pillars. It's about being a good financial fiduciary. It's about hiring a great team. It's about working with great franchisees and supporting them to be successful. And then it's about making sure that collectively we're taking care of those end customers that use our service. And so we measure all of those things. And then ideally that all rolls up to the top. So we get our overall strategy. And then most importantly, it cascades down to each individual. And so it's really clear for them what it is that they have to work on. And if it's not clear, then we make it clear, and until it is crystal clear to everybody what they have to do. And then the theory is, and what we've demonstrated works for us, is if everybody achieves what they've set out to achieve, it should roll right up to the top and we achieve our overall goals as a company. So that's sort of a dumbed down, simplistic view of it, but there's a lot that goes into it, but it is really important. And I think, people ultimately, when they have a role, they want to know how their success is going to be gauged and measured. And that's something we spend a lot of time on. So
I love that you guys are doing that right out the gate. I'd love to hear from you in regards to retention efforts. What are some of your tips and tricks for retaining employees for as long as possible?
Yep. So one is, it starts with this environment and this culture. I mean, we get companies, competitors, others call on our employees a lot. And I know this because they tell me they do, and they're not just telling me that. They would like to hire people away, and that's great. I'm very, we do the same to them. But typically our team says they're really happy where they are. And so, one, you have to be competitive with compensation. That is sort of table stakes. 2, you create that environment where people feel that sense of engagement, where they feel like they're challenged and they really don't want to go anywhere. 3, I think you have to be able to create a path of upward mobility for people. And so one of the ways that we do that is by adding these new brands. And so as we add new brands to our portfolio, more senior positions open up and we can move people from one brand to another. And that creates that upward mobility, because ultimately there's only so much that can be done in any one brand. So I think that's important. And then beyond that, we have, and I think this is an important part of it, is we have an incentive unit plan, as well as an opportunity for people to buy shares or buy units in the company. And so what it does is it really creates, and we're very transparent with how we value our business, how we look at it, much more like a public entity would do, or maybe, in the private equity world. That was sort of my background. So we show people what the value of their shares are, and they can see that improving, and they can tie directly their contributions to the outcome of the value of the business. And over time, they can build up a nest egg. Yeah, it's great, right? I mean, they can build up a nest egg, and that over time, hopefully, they got something there that's very meaningful to them, whatever the end of that journey may look like. And so I've never been somebody that wants to sort of go on this journey, get to a destination and be there by myself. That just doesn't sound too much fun. Like I want to bring people with me on that. And I'm very fortunate that we've got a great team, right from the senior leadership team that's been with me from the very beginning, all the way down through the organization. We just got some great people. So that's our way of being able to share in the upside or the success that we have.
That's incredible. And for those of you listening, I can attest to it because a dear friend of mine and the brand president of I Love Kickboxing now, Chris Bushy, told me I had to get Kevin on the podcast because he's just a superstar.
Well, Chris is a good guy, and I know he's doing some good stuff over at I Love Kickboxing too.
It's awesome. Kevin, I know that you have, I mean, you're a pretty fit guy. You're investing in your future and your employees' future, which is incredible. Would love to hear from you what your morning routine looks like as a CEO with 100 employees.
Well, it starts by getting up sort of normal time, maybe 6 a.m., 5:30 to 6 a.m. Try to get 7.5 to 8 hours sleep. It's a coffee. And then usually I jump right onto my iPad and I review the reports from the previous day for our team and the companies that we have and really look at the individual results of our franchisees. It's just a routine that I'm in doing. As a result, actually, I think I have the highest viewership of our reports of anyone in the company, much to the chagrin of the guy that actually makes them and produces them. Because every now and then I'll find things that just don't tie, but he does a great job for us and gets things fixed. But I usually start doing that, and then I read some newspapers. I read the Journal. Occasionally jump into the Times to see what nonsense they're sharing. And then I usually work out. I usually walk my dog for a couple miles, and then I'll either swim or I'll do the Peloton or do some weights. So try to stay, so by the time I get into the office, I feel like I'm totally energized, refreshed, ready to go. And if I try to alter that, if I try to do the workout at the end of the day, it usually doesn't work out that well. I'm usually exhausted and I don't get there. So I like getting it done in the morning. It sort of set the stage for the day.
That's incredible. Kevin, what are some of your tips and tricks for setting that morning routine proper for people that do manage large teams or are looking to in the future?
I think once you start doing it and you develop the discipline, most people, when they get to this, level of senior leadership, they've already demonstrated they've got discipline to get up there. And this is just added discipline. But, I do think it's really important to keep your body fit and clean, eat well, and just stay fit. I think it just causes, a lot more clear thinking. I think it sends a good message to the rest of the team that's valued. And I just think people feel great. I mean, we got people in our office that, couple individuals I'm thinking of in particular, where they, during the pandemic, they used as an opportunity to really get their fitness in order. They dropped a lot of weight. And you talk to them and they've never felt healthier in their lives. They just feel like they've got energy that they've never had before. And I think it's just great. It's really nice to see. So I know for some people it's hard to make that jump to get to that spot. But once you get there, you just want to stick with it because the alternative is pretty challenging.
Agreed. Thank you for that. Discipline will get us a lot.
Discipline,
Speaking of discipline, I guess it was originally forced myself into reading more a couple of years ago. And now, since asking this question to C-levels, people all over the globe, I have got a library of amazing books. So I'd love to hear from you. What are your top reads that everybody in your space has read or needs to read as soon as possible?
There were some. It's funny. I used to read a lot when I was younger. I probably do more podcasting or audiobooks now than I do, but I do like reading. I mean, a couple books so I'll give you two books. One's business, one's not. One's more philosophy. But the one book, which is really an easy read, is The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. It's a very thin book, and it really gets to the role of a leader and of a team in an organization. You need to be both effective and efficient. And so then it comes down to your time and how you spend your time. And the discipline that I developed when I was in South African Airways was working with my secretary every Monday morning. And by the way, at Buzz, we don't have assistants or secretaries. We just sort of do our own thing. But back then I was managing a big team. I would sit with her every Monday and I'd review all the meetings that I was in from the previous week. And I had the buckets that I would put them in. And I would tell her, I'd say, I need less of this, more of this. And that's how, over time, you really develop your effectiveness because, big organizations, even small organizations, you can consume a lot of time by being in useless meetings, spending time with people you really don't need to spend time with. So how you use your time is really important, and the effective executive does that. And then the other one, which is, have you heard of the book Atlas Shrugged?
No.
No. See, most and the younger generation probably wouldn't have listened to it, but it's the exact opposite of the effective executive. It's sort of a very large book. It's written by Ayn Rand, who was a writer, a philosopher from Russia that came to this country. But it was her belief that the American system of capitalism is the greatest system in the world. And so she demonstrated that through her books and explained her philosophy through her books. So things like Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged, these are all really, like, at one point, Atlas Shrugged was considered the second most read book in the world behind the Bible. So it was great. It's hard to get through. She could have probably written the book in maybe half the pages that she used, but there are passages in there I'll continue to go back and look and read. And it really gets to the heart of what we do, why we do it, and it's pretty cool.
I got my next book. Thank you.
Yeah, if you ever have a problem sleeping at night, that's the one to read. But then there are some other great books, like business books, like Scaling Up, The E-Myth. All those are good books. A lot of that stuff is embedded into our operating system as a company. If you want just a real business book, those are good books to read.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin, for those nuggets.
Yeah.
So as you know, hiring is clearly an imperative part to scaling in today's world.
Yeah.
I used to ask when I had a team of just under 500 people and I was couldn't hire fast enough. I had a question that I got from Microsoft, which was, how many ping pong balls fit inside of an airplane? And I don't want the actual answer, but I want to know every question that you want answered in your thought process. So, speak that out loud. And that question taught me so many things about how people think, if they're comfortable, where is their mind going? Do you guys use any questions like that? Or do you personally have questions you're like, okay, this is a trick, I'm going to see how the person answers?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yes. So we do. So when I worked at Bain and Company, one of the things that Bain does, and it's not just Bain, McKinsey does it, BCG does it, and then you've got sort of derivatives like what Microsoft does, but we will often give case studies to the individuals. And so I ask a couple of questions. One, and I've backed off on asking this a little bit, but I always ask candidates what their SAT was. And some of these people are in their late 20s. They're like, I don't remember. It's like, everybody remembers their SAT. And so what we found at Bain, and again, this isn't, it worked at Bain, but I also think it's important to know is that it does get to the heart of what it is you're trying to do. Like, whether it's English or math, if they're very high on math and they're going into an analytic position, that's great. If they're really low on their math and they tried to be brought into probably not a good plan. So, and then it gets a little bit to how seriously they took school, and it tells you a lot. I don't overweight that answer, but I do want to understand what it is. And then the second thing we'll do, so they give them different case studies. So I'll ask them a question like, tell me the last place where you went to lunch or dinner. And so if they say McDonald's or Burger King, I'll ask them, tell me what the annual revenue is of that McDonald's or Burger King. And or a Cheesecake Factory is an example. We have one down the road and people have gone to Cheesecake Factory. Tell me what the annual revenue is of that business. And then you back up. And I said, here's what I want you to do. Just ask me questions. I'll give you answers. And if you need a calculator, great. If you want a piece of paper and pencil to figure this out, that's fine too. More importantly, what I'm trying to gauge is, are you asking the right questions bottoms up? And I said, yeah. And usually what I'll do is I'll do it in two ways. I'll say, first, just guess. Tell me the number, write it down on the back of that paper and turn it over. Just guess. Okay, now let's do a bottoms up and you tell me the questions you want to ask. So, how many people can be in there? How many tables are there? How many 4 tops, 2 tops? How many turns will happen during lunch hour, Monday to Friday? What about at night? Will they turn the table twice, 3 times at night? Fridays and Saturdays will probably be higher in revenue than the rest of the week. Oh, there's a bar in there. What's the average ticket of the bar? How many people can stand up? So it all just adds up. And so they try to get revenue for a day, then, then a week, because some of the days are different than the week. And then it just builds up. And so, to get an annual number. And then when they get the number, and I've had some people say, okay, Cheesecake Factory probably does about $500,000. Okay, great. And then we do the math and it does around $10 million. Yeah. So that tells you okay, maybe they're not they don't have the nose for value or something, but it's been fun to watch. I've had some people that have completely nailed the case though. I mean, really have done a good job on it.
I'm just imagining myself in your office getting asked that question, and I would have loved, I was in the food technology space prior to this, and I would have loved that question. But it's really incredible when we ask somebody to ask their questions for their thought process. What happens? I'll share this last story. I had the lead Android developer for Xerox in my office, this adorable young woman that is very reserved. She's a developer, so it's her personality. And I asked her the ping pong ball question. Her answer was no. And I said to her, this isn't a yes or no question. I'm trying to ask you, like, what are your questions that you need answered in order to know how many ping pong balls fit in the plane? And she said no. And I couldn't hire her. But my business partner at the time said, it doesn't matter. This girl's resume is the best of the best. I don't care about your question. Let's hire her. Hands down, the worst hire of our lives. 4 months later, the whole team wanted to quit because of her lack of ability to communicate and all these things. And I'm like, the question, it told us the answers.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly right. Those are the early signs that, okay, if they're going to take this very defined approach, number one is one thing, right? It's like, that's not how we roll here in this company. Yeah. So you're exactly right. I mean, it's important to have a set of questions that have consistently been able to produce good results for you. And again, when we deviate from our process, it usually gets us into trouble. So having a process in place for the hiring is really good.
100%. Kevin, my last question as we wrap up, my favorite one. If you were going to have dinner with a historical figure from the past, who are you eating with? Where are you eating? What are you eating? Give us some details.
It's probably Winston Churchill. Awesome. I mean, he was somebody that I was going back and forth between Mandela, Reagan, and Churchill, but it's probably Churchill because I think that he led in a very unconventional and difficult period. He was able to maintain a sense of humor consistently, sometimes a biting sense of humor, but it was still pretty darn funny when I read some of the books on him. And I just think he had a vision. There were ties with him, by the way, too. When I was working in South Africa, a lot of people don't know about Winston, but he was actually a prisoner of war in the Boer War down in South Africa. And then as a young kid, and then made his way back to Britain. He escaped, made his way up to Britain, and he was writing letters about his journey up. And then by the time he got to the UK, he was a pretty well-known ex-prisoner of war, and he eventually got elected to the House and Parliament, and then the rest is history. But he just seems like somebody that would be fun. He would be fun, but also super interesting too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Kevin, I so appreciate your journey, being at Buzz since 2012 and holding this organization up. It's incredible. Congrats. We're so excited to continue to follow you.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's always fun. You're a good interviewer, and it was just fun spending time with you.
Kevin Wilson on LinkedIn, people. Buzz Franchise Brands. Get involved, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thank you so much. That's it for this week's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure to head over to our site, local-business-hacks.com, to check out the show notes and send me questions or ideas for future episodes. If you want to grow your business, just like the people you've heard from here, follow Local Business Hacks Podcast and tune in for new tips, tricks, and tactics. Until next time, thanks for listening and keep hacking.